John the co-main, also really, really, really good. Charles Oliveira is a minus 250 favorite over Michael Chandler, who comes back at plus 200. We know the rhetoric with Chandler at this point was that he had been holding out for the McGregor fight for the last 2 years. You know, he did the Ultimate Fighter. He handled that very, very well, I think, with a lot of class. I'm speculating a little bit, but you've known Chandler for a brief time. Given what he's endured the last 2 years, I mean, how, before you talk about it in the fighter meetings, how do you anticipate that holdout might change his attitude for this fight? Is there going to be some extra fire, a little bit more vitriol from Iron Mike?
Yes, and maybe that doesn't dovetail with those even in his camp who would like him to exercise a little bit more patience, but I just don't think that is necessarily in his DNA. It stands to reason if there was any possible way for this hard worker to take his strength and conditioning to another level, it seems as though he has done that. You got to think in terms of brain preservation. He's smart enough to recognize when he should have been sparring over the last couple of years and when not. I don't necessarily worry about this as him losing 2 years of his fighting prime just because of the way he takes care of himself. I do feel like he can still make a championship run. I do feel like he can cash here as a plus 200 or so underdog against Charles Oliveira. He was so close to beating Charles and becoming the undisputed UFC lightweight champion of the world. And again, a lot of consequence, a lot of peril early on against Michael Chandler. I mean, Charles Oliveira, pound for pound, as a lightweight, is one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters that I have ever seen. But Michael Chandler's got a great chance to beat him. And I do think it stands to reason for somebody like Michael Chandler, the layoff could actually pay dividends. So I love that we're scheduled for 5 rounds if we need him. Gosh, epic is an overused adjective, but I just can't wait for the co-main event. It's the fight that jumps off the card for me. And just given the nature of their first meeting, I know it was several years ago, but it's kind of a fight that had to happen again. It's not happening with championship stakes, but if it can't be for the title, to do it as a 5-round co-main event inside the world's most famous arena, right underneath John Jones, you can't do much bigger than that. And I know Iron Mike is ready to hear Bruce Buffer call his name.
Yeah, you mentioned how close that first fight was at UFC 262, and I'm trying to think, like, Charles Oliveira, just such a savage, right? So you're Michael Chandler, and you come so close to beating him, and you probably walk away from that fight thinking, like, damn, I almost had it. Now, a rematch, do you feel like, Chandler could be a guy to be like, this is a tough mountain to climb, or is that, narrow failure really just going to only motivate him that much more?
Well, in theory, they're both better. Charles Oliveira is better, right? Stacking another great training camp and a great performance, I thought, even in defeat against Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300. So even if we want to maybe, at least in my mind, minimize the layoff for Michael Chandler, you have to at least acknowledge the active competition for Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, who in theory is going to present his best version to date. But if you're Michael Chandler, I don't think you change your stripes. I think you go try to knock a man out as early as possible. And you hope that in those moments, maybe you just are maybe more focused on location and not just throwing complete power and reckless abandon at times into every shot. But I think you'd probably agree with me, right? Even if you and I aren't lifelong martial artists nor analysts per se, that Michael Chandler, almost called him Michael Jordan. Let's not do that live. But Michael Chandler had near fight ending moments, and he's got to be pursuant of those early and often. And I think he's going to go try to knock a man's head off right out of the chute.